also renovating office space. There's a yoga studio, but last fall the roof started leaking uncontrollably, and we tried desperately to fix it, and we were unable to ourselves. So we're looking at about $60,000 worth of repairs over there. So before each of the Dharma talks, I'm going to be giving. This isn't live, is it? Okay. So I'm going to start, I guess. All right. Very professional. So welcome. Thank you for joining us virtually. My name's Sokuzan, and I'm the head monk here at Sokukoji Buddhist Monastery in Battle Creek, Michigan, with the light shining behind me. And Sokuzan will be in momentarily to give his Dharma talk, but I wanted to let all of you know that have been joining us virtually, participating in Sokuzan's Dharma talks, that here at Sokukoji, in the midst of all of our growth, we're looking for a little bit of help. We're currently functioning with 10 full-time residents. We do a lot of outreach into state and federal prisons, whether that's visiting inmates, writing to them, sending in materials, also working on a weekly basis in a drug and alcohol inpatient rehabilitation center. So this month we're looking to raise money for the roof of one of our buildings that started leaking last fall, and we tried very hard to fix it, but unfortunately we were unable to, and we're looking to raise about $60,000 to repair that roof. Your donations are greatly appreciated to support not just our facilities here, but the services we provide to others. And if you'd like to make a donation, please visit our website at www.sokukoji.org, and you can donate either monthly or a one-time donation, or you could send checks to Sokukoji Buddhist Community at 33 Anderson Court, Battle Creek, Michigan 49017. And Sokuzan will be in momentarily to give his talk. Thank you for your generosity.
that topic, that title is there because it's a question. And you could actually practice in this way when you see anything. You could start with something very simple. As soon as you see a color, like on the tanka up here, the red stripes, ribbons, instead of immediately going to some thought process about it, you could back up a quarter of an inch, an eighth of an inch. Who sees that red? Who sees that color before you even name it red? Who sees that? Who perceives that? Before anybody perceives that, who's there? You can work with your awareness in this way. Before anyone hears this, is there a hearer? Is there someone hearing before this happens? Or does the hearer appear when the sound occurs? It's just an awareness exercise. There's nothing to accomplish. If you start accomplishing things, this is a misunderstanding. Just before, who hears? Who? Find out. True with all of the sense fields, including the mind. Who thinks? Rather than fueling and feeding and encouraging the thought process to find things out, to go over here, to stop thinking this, start thinking that. Do nothing with your thoughts. As Trangu Rinpoche said some time ago, if you do nothing to thoughts, thoughts will do nothing to you. Pretty good teaching. So who smells, who tastes? Who actually tastes? The sense of taste is very, very intimate. No one can taste for you. No one can see for you. Find out. Rather than get lost in the vast sea, the vast swamp of the sense fields, where you like this and you don't like this and you don't care about this. You don't care about that, you like this, you don't like this, on and on, changing things out, always wanting something else. This is, whatever it is, not quite good enough, not quite what I was looking for. You ever go shopping? Something better, shopping for something better. My teacher, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, talked about spiritual materialism, cutting through spiritual materialism, the spiritual materialism that's always looking for some gaining idea, practicing a spiritual path. Now listen to this. Who hears that? What a teaching that is. You could call that a sinus teaching. So who receives? Cutting through spiritual materialism, the spiritual supermarket is always looking for some way to enhance, support, elaborate, decorate our spiritual path. Just a misunderstanding. This is why the sitting practice of meditation is so powerful. Whether you're a Buddhist or not, I don't care. Not interested in that particularly. If you need to do this, nobody's going to be able to stop you. And I'm certainly not going to encourage you to do anything other than train your mind. Don't live another day without looking, examine, find out who you are. Because if this body, as I've said several times in the last few weeks, for sure, if you allow this body-mind complex to go back into the elements, back into the earth, back into the water, back into the fire, back into the air, without finding out who you are, then you'll continue to spin and you'll be back right back around again. And I don't believe in reincarnation. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, you could ask questions. But you will be back. Something will be back. Anytime there's a desire to be safe, a desire to gain, a desire for anything other than what is occurring or what is happening right now, we just continue to spin. We keep looking for, as Lawrence Ferlinghetti in his wonderful book published back in the late 1950s, Coney Island of the Mind. It's like a Coney Island of the mind. You're familiar with that, aren't you, J.D.? Yeah, he was a beat poet. But he started a bookstore, City Lights. So find out who this is. Find out who you are, not just the name you were given, not just your identity, your description of who you are, your abilities, your talents, and so on. Find out fundamentally, so that it doesn't make any difference whether what happens to you. You're not really concerned about what happens next. Why? There isn't any next. There's only this. There's only this. Don't believe a word I say. Don't disbelieve a word I say. Don't ignore a word I say. There are the three poisons right there. Passion, grasping, aggression, destroying, and ignorance, or shutting down or looking away or distracting yourself into the swimming pool. So who receives? Who actually, is there an identity behind what shows up in our sense fields, including the mind? Is there someone who's thinking? Is there a thinker? Is there someone who actually thinks? Is there someone who smells, who tastes? There's someone who touches. Is there someone touching that? Looks like it. Looks like there's someone touching. If this is touching, is this not touching? Find out. This is the teaching of the Buddha's Dharma going back 2,500 years is not a belief system. There's nothing to believe here. If you think it's about believing in Buddhism, misunderstanding. The word Buddha means awakened. The Buddha was the awakened one. What did he awaken to? Nothing is separate. Dependent origination. There is not two things anywhere. You can't find two things anywhere. If you think there's two things, this is delusion. Doing shikantaza or sitting practice of meditation like you were doing earlier is about coming in, sitting down, holding still, and beginning to just receive. Receive the wall, receive your thoughts, receive the smell, perhaps the fragrance of the incense, or perhaps not. Perhaps the sound of the chant leader, the doan, giving instruction. Very simple. Just receive whatever comes. And as that comes through any of the sense fields, whatever that object is, whether it's a sound, a smell, a taste, a sight, a color, a texture, just receive. And as you receive, just flip around, just take a quick glance to see, is there someone receiving this? And watch how quickly the ego mind, the self-centered mind, will fill it in right away. Yes, I am. Yeah, I'm receiving. You might even call yourself by name. You might even sense that your name is about ready to rise up. So awareness is not about correcting that. If you think it's about correcting something, you'll continue to spin. It's always about awareness. It's always about consciousness. These body minds are going to come and go and come and go. You don't go anywhere. What do you think about that? for me to tell you something about it and explain it, which I could do, conceptually, we could talk about that, the nature of physics or something. I could go into that a little bit. Not that I'm a physicist, but a little bit of using ideas and concepts and metaphors to go back and forth and talk about how long it takes for sound to reach your ears and all of that. You know, you could work that out, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about right now. Find out if there is an identity, or if the identity is something that you're inventing. Ego is unreal. You don't have to get rid of your ego. Just be aware of it. If you're aware of it, it'll start to look like an imposter. It will come in and it will take over your wisdom mind and present you with all kinds of hopes and fears and wishes for this and desires for that. Yes, sir.
Oftentimes, when looking at like thinking or thinker, you'll say something like thinking thinks, or hearing hears, smelling smells. And I'm wondering, in that, does it still have the quality of a thinker? Does it still look like that?
It could. It could be that there's someone thinking, but you can see at the same time by approaching it that way, there's a possibility you could see that thinking, that thinker is unreal. It's not solid. It's an invented. It's invented and it's separated out as if someone is over here receiving something over there.
Is there a difference between receiving a thought and generating a thought?
What do you think? What do you think, Junchu? I like that. That's a nice gesture. I should answer all my questions that way. It's that Zen guy. All he does is this. Some kind of secret teaching. More?
Is identity circumstantial?
Yeah. That's constantly changing. Identity, even though it feels like there's somebody here, there's a constant flux, a constant discontinuity of identity. This is why we're so sensitive to what others think, because we get our identity from others. We get our identity from our culture, from our family, our mom, our dad, our brothers, our sisters. And if that is dependable, if that works, then it's fine. But you'll notice that if suddenly you do something that somebody doesn't approve of and they take away their support, it can be pretty tragic. It can be devastating. A very interesting area to look the way you're kind of looking for a little bit of support from somebody. You could call it love, you could call it support or appreciation, call it anything. But needing something else in order to make sure you're okay, that you're functioning okay, that you're validated. It's an interesting area, isn't it? Go ahead.
If someone's identifying with the sky instead of the things that arise in it, would the situation like you're describing, that support being pulled out?
If they're identifying with the sky, which is a way that I talk about consciousness, but that's the path quality, that's the practice of it. So to practice seeing your mind like a sky and seeing clouds like, or thoughts like clouds, means that you're slowly changing your allegiance over from the attachment to clouds, the attachment to thoughts, the attachment to the shape, the feeling, the texture, the sound, what they mean. You're going over to the spaciousness of the area in which they occur, which is the mind or consciousness. So the way I understand your question, you're saying if someone has made that change, then what was the question about it?
Would that pulling of support from other people, would it still have the same impact?
You mean other people pulling from you?
Yeah.
pulling from support. It would depend on things that it depended on. So in other words, it would depend if there's still some kind of low levels, low level of self-centeredness, or a low level of wanting something else, wanting the support. You might, the image there is meant to help you train your mind. If once that has happened, you could say, as if it were an event, once you no longer identify with clouds, the clouds come and go, you don't identify with them, then you may get support, you may not. If on this path, what you'd be working with is how to help others. And the people who are suffering, who are attached to their thought patterns and are struggling with them and are torturing themselves with them, you would help them with their permission. And that might be just listening to them. You might have to listen to someone have difficulty, complain, and go through lots of different things before you're actually getting permission to help them. Of course, the kind of help I give people is what? Mind your own business? Yeah, that's one of them. That's for sure. But train your mind. Somebody comes this direction, I don't say become a Buddhist, I don't say receive vows, I don't say move into the monastery. I don't even say meditate. I say train your mind. Because if you continue to function in this incredibly crazy world without understanding who this is, who you are fundamentally, don't get your identity from anybody, don't get it from me, don't believe a word I say. And again, don't disbelieve it, don't look away from it. You're in the room, you're giving me permission to say something, I'm saying it. Find out who you are. Don't settle. Don't settle until you know for sure who you are. Yes?
How does meditation keep your brain healthy?
How does it what?
Keep your brain healthy.
How does it keep your brain healthy?
Because it's keeps you away from eating junk food. Got that? Okay. It's all kinds of junk food, not just Twinkies. Just the elaborations that we do. We feed our mind on fear, we feed our mind on hope. Those two are very similar.
Patrick from Seattle has a question. He asks, I understand that the Buddha did not express whether there is an actual self or not, yet it is such a hot topic among Buddhists. What is meant by his non-acknowledgement of that fundamental question?
I didn't know the guy, so I don't know for sure. But it looks like it was probably his way of not giving it too much weight. So it's there. There's something there, but it's just unreal. It's built up some kind of an entity, but even that entity is not solid. And it can be affected by the causes and conditions that look like they are happening around him, her, them. Andrew,
What continues if nothing lasts?
nothing continues. Unless it does. So any direction with it, any duality, anytime you buy into this, you're also buying into its opposite. It's called duality, Advaita. It's that issue, or that problem has been around in the early Indian tradition, even before the time of the Buddha, non-dual. We set up a polarity all the time, success and failure, life and death, up and down, back and forth. Buddhas and sentient beings. More? questions, please.
What's the difference between believing what you say and giving you the benefit of the doubt?
Believing what I say, you're ignoring what I'm saying. If you believe something, this is what, anytime you believe something, you stop investigating. Nothing is static. So, giving me the benefit of the doubt is just listen. Listen, you don't have to understand what I'm saying. The same way when we study the Dharma here every day at noon, study traditional Dharma, the Lankavatara Sutra, the Heart Sutra, and the works of Dogen Zenji, and so on. It's not so much about understanding what's happening, it's about studying it. Just bring yourself to those teachings. More?
Yeah, that comes out of the you saying to find out if there is a hearer, and I'm wondering how to give you the benefit of the doubt to investigate that, even though I come up with conclusions about it.
What's your conclusion?
Both sides, I guess, of there is or there isn't.
You mean like two arrows meeting? People are laughing because that's his Dharma name, I think. Or did I say something else funny? Go ahead, please.
What does it mean to give you the benefit of the doubt to question that further, or how do I look into that, I guess?
I think it's just allow it to be what it is. Just consider it, listen to it. Don't abandon it by coming to a conclusion. Don't conclude anything. If anything needs to be concluded, it will happen out of just the spaciousness of your own consciousness. Like, for instance, if we're sitting here and, knock on whatever this is, if we start to smell smoke, we may start concluding a little bit, but we'll probably investigate and see if there's possibly a fire. But we wouldn't necessarily just conclude and say, well, it's just smoke. It doesn't mean anything. And then somebody could say, well, where there's smoke, there's fire. And then you could say, not really. Be in the present, man. As the place burns down. It's a kind of a weak example or metaphor for that, but there's something about that you could find out for yourself how to appreciate anything that's being said in such a way that you don't abandon what is there by jumping to a conclusion about it. Because if you say, oh, it's right or it's wrong, or Sokuzan said, or anybody said this, so therefore it must be, but allow yourself to not know what that is, to not understand that. This is what the approach to wisdom actually is. Contrary to the approach to getting a PhD in nuclear physics. Not that I've done that, but I'm saying that's actually a gathering and accumulating idea. This path is not about gathering and accumulating, other than it is observing that we tend to gather and accumulate lies. Yes, sir.
How can we encourage ourselves to not know if all we do is find ourselves concluding on things?
Then just look at that. It's just about observing and being aware of that situation, not so much about trying to find out where to shut it off at. If you just observe, just the awareness itself is powerful if it doesn't have an agenda other than just be aware. Because your natural state is not separate from wisdom. In our tradition, we usually say, everyone is the Buddha. Everyone is the awakened one. The Buddha, when he awoke, everywhere he looked, he saw the Buddha. Why did he see the Buddha? Because he also saw everything is dependently arisen. There's not a separate thing anywhere. And since he awoke, everything awoke. It might sound kind of romantic. I doubt that he particularly felt that way 2,500 years ago. awesome.
What is Dharma?
Pardon me?
Dharma? How would you define Dharma?
So dharma is a Sanskrit word that means basically truth or law or rule. So Buddha Dharma, or awakened truth, is conceptually described as everything is dependently arisen. Everything that looks like a separate thing, every being, every nerve cell, every star, every so-called discrete or separate situation is not separate from anything else. You can't pull something out of there. Not separate. So that's one way. Then you, simply put, you have the dharma of wood, how wood grows. You have the dharma of how to make clackers. You get a saw. You got wood. Be careful. Cut the wood this way. Cut it that way. Carve some fancy Chinese characters in it. Check it out, see if it works. It's the dharma of making a, musical sound or an instrument or something. So there's the dharma of that. There's the dharma of fixing sushi, which is pretty complicated. The dharma of fixing oatmeal is not quite so difficult. I'd sure like to have some oatmeal. I'm not kidding. I haven't had that in a long time. So it's the dharma or the truth or the law or the rule around any particular thing. So in a very mundane way, the dharma of this, the dharma of that. But the Buddha dharma is the awakened truth. It's the truth that if you awaken to what the Buddha was pointing to 2,500 years ago, and his the lineage holders down through the centuries, warm hand to warm hand. No one read this out of a book, and I'm not saying people haven't realized this without even practicing Buddhism, sure, because it doesn't belong to anyone. But it's basically, Buddhism is warm hand to warm hand. You need to meet someone who realized what the Buddha realized. If you don't meet that person, I'm not saying you won't realize it, but it will be more difficult because you won't know what realization is.
How does meeting someone who's realized help us know what realization is?
Because then when you make a mistake, they can hit you. It's a joke. Yes, sir.
Yeah, what do you believe about the relationship between meditation and addiction?
Well, I don't believe much, because belief is thinking that something is true without really looking at it closely. We're just taking it for granted or giving it a pass without really looking closely. But I think the way I teach it to people who have what they call addictions, which I've been doing for quite a long time, and training other people to do that also, I think that outside of being a Buddhist or having it be a religious path, a spiritual path, it is a way of helping each person, if they decide to do this, to actually sit down and watch the way the mind keeps fooling itself. One of the biggest problems that addicts have, to use the same word you used, someone with an addiction has, is the self-deception. Sometimes if the habituation chemically is one part of it, and then there's just the cultural addiction to it. But without looking at that very closely, without really stretching the awareness so that you can see that way, the way I like to say, the metaphor I like to use is, if you don't have an awareness practice, before you can see the bad neighborhood you'll already be in it, you'll already be using. Because the nature of the mind and the nature of our living situation is so sensitive to causes and conditions that are outside of our control. We don't know that next week at 3 a.m. Suddenly we're going to just, out of nowhere, we just suddenly have this emotional tsunami that comes roaring in, not sent by anybody. It's just suddenly we're feeling this way. We're feeling depressed. And then where do we turn? To our old friend, as they say, which is not your friend, but we turn there. And we go to that, and we justify, we talk to ourselves about it. Well, I need to do this. Well, I quit before, I can do this again. If I can quit once, I can quit again. And this is really difficult. I'm really having a hard time. I'm just going to do this one more time, and then that's it. Make a little deal with ourselves. It's called self-deception. And if you there's no guarantee, but if you practice meditation enough, then the awareness is there for the tsunami that comes along. There's a lot of room. It's like having without the training, it's like having a tsunami with no space. There's nothing but the tsunami. And so you get claustrophobia, and then you just have to go and rush into use. Whereas if there's a lot of room there, then there's more, using a metaphor again, there's more space for that. The tsunami isn't over the top. You can see it. It's difficult. It doesn't feel good, but you're not buying it. It might have a sales pitch, but you'll listen because you want to be respectful to your neurosis. So you'll listen to it, but you're not gonna buy. You're gonna wait. You're gonna wait. It's called patience. That's the fancy word for waiting, or don't do anything unless you have to. And then, since nothing lasts, it will pass. It might come right back, but you just did that. So maybe you can do it again. Maybe 3 weeks from now, when that emotional tsunami comes again, and it seems like the more you're able to back away from that, then there's a better and better chance. No guarantee, but that's the way I would describe it. Further question about that?
Yes, sir.
You understand?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Train your mind. Yes.
My question was the same as Cheryl's earlier.
Exactly the same?
Almost.
You had exactly the same question as Shoto's? Okay, go ahead.
In the situation that you're describing with the addiction, it's for me easier to see self-deception when I think that thing is a friend, and playing around with that enough to see that it's an enemy. But what is the self-deception when you see it as an enemy and you want an enemy at that point, so you go for it?
Mhm. Don't go enemy and friend. I just used that, and I'm talking to this gentleman. If I were talking to you, I wouldn't use those metaphors. He's working with a different set of enemies. You're not. You're beyond that stage. Don't misunderstand. It's not really a compliment. I'm not complimenting you. I'm not criticizing you. I would never compliment children.
Make it easy.
Yeah. He's way too stuck on himself. More?
What's being missed when it still looks like there's an enemy and a friend in that situation?
There's not much being missed. You're probably seeing your own imputation or your own belief in that. It's just that don't do anything with it. Don't take it to the bank. It's counterfeit. You can't spend it. So just do nothing with it. Less is better. You've heard me say that hundreds of times. Whatever arises is totally appropriate, including because things are dependently arisen, then the very neurosis or the very difficulty you have in the beginning, don't try to get rid of that because it's hooked into, it's like a huge, it's called Indra's net. It's just a huge, complicated wires and connections and hooks and nooks and crannies and everything all. Most of them are invisible, but if you push on that over there moves. So do less. Less is better. Unless it's meditation, in which case more is better. Meditate a lot. And all meditation is sit down, hold still, and be a tourist. Just watch what happens. Watch the boats come by. There's a boat. There's a dog. The dog's not on a leash. A lot of your thoughts aren't on leashes. Just observe, just observe. More?
How do you work with an identity when it feels like it's being given to you from everyone else?
Well, that's a great question. All you have to do is see that you're getting your identity from others. I'm actually doing that to you by going after you. You cause your identity to fluff up a little bit. Like I sometimes say, if I criticize you, if I came after you hammer and tong, you'll know exactly where your identity is, where your imputed or imagined identity or ego is. Just the same as if I compliment you. And so less is better. Whatever happens is exactly what needs to happen. There's no other thought pattern needs to come, and you don't need any post-it notes on anything. The fancy word for that is discipline. And it's not following a rule. It's just, you're just not you're not buying or selling anything. You're no longer in business anymore, but you haven't left the room. No longer accepting, no longer rejecting, and you're not converting anybody's capital, or you're not converting it into anything else. It's just that. More? Saito?
How do we get to know ourselves or befriend ourselves when the self that we see changes every time we look at it?
That's how you do it. Just watch the change. That which is seeing, I was talking earlier, just who smells, who senses, any of the senses, who is it? And so when you see that changing, you'll notice that which, to say it, or that consciousness that is watching that change is not doing anything. But we tend to get hooked. We tend to load up the changes with an identity. I'm feeling terrible. Sometimes we'll say it, we'll lecture ourselves. I'm feeling so terrible. Why do I feel like this today? And then instead of looking at that closely, we'll go into some kind of, well, I'm not drinking enough water, or I need to exercise more, or any number of things. And so what I would say, and this is difficult to do without a strong sitting practice, but just watch the changes. That which is watching, this is a very polarized way of saying it, but I think it'll mean something to you if you reflect on it. That which is watching is not doing anything. That witness quality. And at some point, even the witness goes away. And there's just this. There is not even any witness anymore. There isn't anyone. If you think there is, you'll continue to spin and go towards good things and avoid bad things. Difficult life. More, Saito? Anyone else? Questions? Yes?
I don't know if this is more of a challenge for lay practice than it would monastic, but when you were talking about, my question was the exact same that you were talking about earlier, and that is that when other people around you come, receive you with all these ideas that they're getting from wherever.
Yeah.
And it becomes real to them.
Yeah.
This identity that you might not even recognize becomes real to other people, and it's really hard not.
What's your question?
How do you overcome that barrier? It's very convincing.
Don't have to overcome it. Good, let's just start with that. Are you a meditator?
So,
Huh?
you should meditate more.
Well, why does everybody say that? Meditate more.
Because you tell us to.
The people that live here don't say that. They're required to sit a lot. So let's change it up a little bit and say it this way. Let's be when someone, you can pick out any person in your that you've been using as an example. You don't have to tell me who they are, but pick out one person and find a way to be with them wherever they're at. So notice what they're doing, and at the same time, don't ignore your sense fields. If this person is interpreting your life for you and telling you what you should do or shouldn't do, or thinks that you shouldn't do this or shouldn't do that, or that's what I'm getting. You're saying that people tend to somewhat interfere with what's happening to you. Is that true, or is there some other example you want to bring up?
It just feels like they create an identity for you. They're creating this real person. That
Don't buy it. Don't sell it.
it's really hard.
I know it's hard. If you are not clear about who you are, then you can't help but get your identity from others. If you're not clear about this, find out who this is. This doesn't mean you won't, if somebody insults you or is upset with you or treats you unfairly, that you won't feel anything. We're not saying you're going to turn into a cement block, but there's no solid being having that emotion anymore. The emotion will still be there. This is why it's so difficult. Because if we have an emotion, we impute or validate some kind of being who's having the emotion. It's called ego. called and when it's really extreme, it's narcissism. Extreme. We all know somebody who's extremely in love with himself, and notice how they're just terrified that somebody might not like them. I mean, there's different different varieties of that. But if you find out who you are, then you won't get your identity from anyone. And it just doesn't mean that you'll be difficult to get along with or stubborn or, like some people who are trying to work with that in a way that's not workable, to say, well, I don't care what anybody thinks. I'm my own person. Sometimes you hear especially men do that. Occasionally women might do that kind of thing. So, but we trying to puff ourselves up. I don't care. I'm just going to do it my way. What's that song? I did it my way. Who's saying that? Frank Sinatra?
Blue Eyes.
Huh?
Old Blue Eyes.
Old Blue Eyes, yeah. So, and he was a good singer.
Like, didn't Usher do something like that?
Huh?
Usher, he was on that one.
Who?
Sex Pistols.
The Sex Pistols did that song?
Did a cover of it, yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's awesome.
It's awesome. Probably is. More about that? That's a good topic. Just let me finish, I'll get back to you in a minute. He's anxious to jump on board here.
I can't put my thoughts together about it.
So let me finish by saying this. Spend some time on the cushion, look at the wall, and don't add. And the way you do that is you see the way you keep adding. That's how you wean yourself away from it. You don't do it by trying to control your mind. You just watch the way your mind is out of control. Because that which is watching the mind move is not doing anything. And that's not actually your identity either, but it's a lot closer rather than the discontinuous identity that keeps looking for results and looking for failure and looking for results and looking for compliments and looking for criticism. On and on and on. It's just tiring, isn't it? You don't think it's tiring?
Oh, yeah, sure,
Okay.
that is absolutely tiring.
Yeah. So the way you do that is with awareness. You don't do it through control. There isn't any control. Control is an illusion. I'm not saying there's a little bit of control. I can pick this up or I can put it down. So you've got some. But the kind of area we're talking about here is a very, very complicated area involving consciousness and the belief in a separate self, that we're a separate being from everything else. Further question? Thank you. Yes.
Is there a difference between getting your identity from other people and other people putting an identity on you?
Yeah, I think when you see that people are putting it on you, then you're probably a little bit put out by that. It's just similar situation, but our attitude towards it may be different. Mm-hmm.
What's happening here when I'm the one here that's like not allowed to drink and not allowed to do those things?
What's happening? What about it?
Is that something that is being put on me? The way it feels to me is like I'm respecting other people's wishes as a community for me not to do that. So it feels like it's less about me and more about being respectful to everybody else.
It's what it's about. Is about training your mind. You're sewing a robe. You're going to be a monk, unless you break your needle or something. So you're doing that, and you came here and you asked for help, and I intend to help you, as long as I have your permission. If you were to go the other way, I would wish you well. Good luck. But as long as you're here, you give me permission to tell you stuff, and up to and including, this is how you're going to train your mind, and you're not going to drink. I think it's only come up one time in the time that you've been here that you asked about that, and I said no, since you brought it up, I think. Isn't that it? And you seem to be fine with that. I don't know how you felt at the time, but you just said okay. Well, you've been drinking. I don't think so. That's a difficult area. I mean, do we want to do this? Not everybody. I'm not here to promote everybody should be monks necessarily, although it wouldn't be a bad idea. from the way the world looks to me. On the other hand, it's your life. Do whatever you want. And if I have permission to help you, then I'll help you. If I don't have permission, then just do the best you can. Try to be honest. Try to find out who you are. Don't walk around with an identity that you're getting from your environment or other people, because they're not separate from you. He chuckled. Thank you very much.
We'll stand and dedicate the merit in the back of our red chant books. I'd like to remind everybody about the donation boxes we have in the hallway. In addition to the fundraiser we have going on this month, we can always use your financial help here at the temple personally. Thank you.
May the merit penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Sokukoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.